All right, hey everyone, welcome to my talk. Like MK said, growing together, creating an environment for you and your team to thrive. Thank you all for being here, and again to Women Who Code for having me. MK gave a great intro. She covered most of it, but I'm a software engineer and engineering leader. Here are some of my social links: Twitter, Instagram. It's not tech related. LinkedIn. Feel free to add me, follow me, whatever. And like MK said, I'm currently a senior software engineer and team lead at Privy, which we are a Boston-based company, although now we're fully remote. We build e-commerce marketing tools for small and medium-sized businesses. And I work primarily on our email product. I work in Rails and React mostly, and I write a lot of code, but I'm also a people manager here at Privy. And prior to Privy, I worked at Pivotal Labs, which is now VMware Pivotal Labs in our Cambridge office. And at Pivotal, I grew from a software engineer to a senior software engineer and people manager. And I really cultivated a love for test-driven development and team building there. I was working as a consultant, so I got to work across many different industries and grew a dozen or so teams. Outside of work, again, I love houseplants and gardening. So I really ran with this theme of growing. You could see I tried to get a lot of plants in the background. I also have a plant side business, which I've been working on, which is a lot of fun. I have my two cats, Boston and Athena. Maybe one of them will make an appearance. And I also have a new puppy, Gracie, who is adorable and takes up a lot of my time now in the best possible way. But back to work stuff. So growing teams is really what excites me the most about my job and my career so far. And at the core of this, I really want every team member to be able to participate freely and fully and create a really collaborative, safe environment for everyone. And so naturally, as I've grown in my own career from being an individual contributor or IC to having managerial responsibilities, what success looks like for me has changed over time. And at times, this has been really confusing. I felt like I wasn't doing enough or getting enough work done or, doing my job correctly. And I think one of the reasons for this is that the criteria for success isn't always clear for new leaders. And so that's why I was struggling with feeling good about my work and feeling like I was contributing. And so that's what this talk is about. It's about how we can reframe and redefine our own success as new leaders. And so during this talk, what we're going to do is we're going to go through sort of a sample career trajectory as a software engineer. We're going to talk about some of the expectations and how our roles changed along the way, and how to measure that new success for ourselves, measure success for ourselves in our new roles. And so to start off, again, I'm going to tell the story of a sample software engineer with some of the expectations and responsibilities that come at different stages. And as a disclaimer, everyone's career is different, every job is different, every organization is different. So this is kind of like a hodgepodge of experiences. So congratulations, it's day one. On your first day as a junior or associate software engineer, maybe you just finished boot camp or college and you're writing real code for real people. And so all the expectations at this point, I believe, really boil down to really getting familiar to writing code in production. Again, if you were in college or boot camp, you were writing a lot of code, but it wasn't like, it likely wasn't going out and being used by people in the world. And so you are in hyper learning mode at this point. I've heard the analogy like drinking from the fire hose a lot for younger engineers, because there's just a ton to know. Like, you are learning the tech stack, even if it's one that you're familiar with, your organization might use it differently or have their own patterns. You're learning the domain, like maybe you're working in insurance or healthcare, like you're learning a lot of lingo and regulations possibly. You're fixing bugs, you're delivering features, and you're learning the development process. So likely some sort of flavor of agile where, you're getting into the rhythm of stand-ups and sprints and that kind of stuff. And hopefully, you're working with your team members and you're collaborating with them and you're pair programming, asking a lot of questions, gathering feedback, and getting a lot from your other team members. And this is great. Like, this is part of what the team's job is, to onboard you. And just to note, like, they are taking that time to do that, right? Like, they're spending some of their energy and time onboarding you. And so congrats, like you were a junior engineer for a year or so, and now you've been promoted to software engineer. Maybe this is like if your organization has a career ladder, like an SE1 or SE2. And things are different now. They're a little more comfortable. Hopefully, you're more comfortable writing code. You're more familiar with the tech stack and the domain. You're delivering new features quickly. You're squashing bugs. You might be taking on some more responsibilities, like maybe you're leading certain meetings. You might take on some mentorship, like interns or junior engineers might join your team, and you work with them. And you're still getting help from senior engineers and other members of your team. Like, no matter what, you're always going to be doing that, but you're also contributing more at this point. So at the more junior engineer stage, like, you're getting a lot from the team, which is great. But at this point, like, you're starting to contribute, not to say, junior engineers aren't contributing to the team, but at this point, you're really like providing good feedback and doing that mentoring and giving back a lot to the team. And this phase feels pretty good. You've been working for a few years, you kind of hit a stride, you've gained some confidence, like you're comfortable here. And you're so good at your job that you become a lead engineer, and this is exciting for you. And maybe it's lead engineer, maybe it's senior software developer, like it depends on the organization, but you're in some entry-level leadership position now. And unless you're going into some sort of full-time engineering manager role, you're probably still writing some code. You're more comfortable than ever in the tech stack and the domain. People on your team and also outside of your team, they're coming to you with questions. Maybe you're playing a more active role in some planning, like you're working closely with product managers and designers and thinking ahead a little bit more. You're continuing to mentor other engineers on your team, maybe on other teams. You might get some direct reports. And you might find yourself working more with your own manager, sort of strategizing and collaborating on some people problems. And previously, before this role, this is what your GitHub looked like, right? Like you have all these green squares, you're writing so much code. But all of a sudden, it's kind of like you traded those green squares for like calendar squares. And when you're working on code, you're still fast and quick and comfortable. But meetings are starting to take up more of your time. You're having less like free blocks on your calendar. It feels like you're jumping in to help members of your team as much as you're working on your own work. And this feels bad, right? This feels bad at first. Prior to this promotion, you were writing code for most of the day, and that's kind of how you were measuring your success. So you were delivering a lot of tickets, like you were helping people here and there, but really you were focusing on your own work. And this felt pretty good because, okay, you internalize, I'm delivering code, I'm doing a great job, like I'm doing my job well. That's what success felt like to you. But the problem is that the deliverables have changed. So going from that awesome IC to delivering less software as a leader can feel like less work, right? Like when you felt like that was your job and you stopped doing some of it, it kind of feels weird. But the work you're doing now is more impactful to the team and the people around you. It's just time to start reframing your success. So that's what we're going to talk about now, is how we can measure and observe this new kind of success that you're going to achieve as a leader. And so firstly is having clear expectations with your own manager. So hopefully, so when you got this new position and promotion, you were giving some expectations and responsibilities, but they're kind of squishy for new leaders, like I mentioned before. So it's a great thing to talk about how you're feeling with your new manager. Likely with your manager, whether they're new or your existing one, likely they've been there before and they can help kind of guide you through this process. They can help clarify expectations and make sure that both of you are aligned on them. If you have a career matrix or career ladder, they can help you align the work you're doing with that. And hopefully you have a trusting relationship with them where you can kind of talk about this stuff. Another part of this is that, at every step in your career, but especially as you get into these more leadership positions, self-advocating is really, really important, because if you're working in, a transparent, like kind of flat organization where you have autonomy, your manager's not breathing down your neck all the time, right? Like they don't actually know what you're doing. So it's part of your job to sort of brag about the work you're doing and bring that to them, because that also makes their lives easier. And similarly to sort of advocating for yourself is collecting feedback. from the people that you work most closely with. And so feedback can be tricky because some of it's qualitative and can be kind of squishy. But what I try to do is align feedback that I receive and feedback that I ask for to the career ladder that my organization has. And with feedback in general, like don't expect your teammates to come up with you out of the blue and give you feedback on what you're doing. Prompt them and re-prompt them if you need to. Try to get specific feedback and don't be afraid to like nudge people a few times if they aren't giving it to you. And similarly to feedback is kind of observing the impact that you're having on your team, where you're kind of you're seeing how they're growing and aligning that to how you've helped that. So an example is, let's say you have your report named Sally. She is a great engineer. She's new to TDD. You've been working with her over time and you've noticed that she's getting better at it. And she's even applying some patterns in a book you've recommended to her about TDD. Like, one, that is great feedback for Sally and her manager if you're not her manager. But two, that's also great feedback on yourself that you can bring to your manager and say, oh, hey, Sally didn't know anything about TDD, and after working with me, like, she's really progressed. So it's kind of like two birds, one stone. And then lastly, I don't know why my image isn't appearing here, is having a peer group of other leaders is really valuable, I've found, in similar positions. So, you know, you're that new leader, like everything is new to you. It's great to talk to other people and see how they're approaching things, how they're approaching their new work, how they're approaching similar problems that you're facing. And so in summation, I'm starting to wrap up now. Like, really, when you're going from that IC role to that entry-level leadership role, the deliverables have changed. And so we want to reframe that feedback of success, right? That way that we give ourselves success. So use your manager as a resource in doing so, request and deliver feedback from your peers, the people that you're working with. Take credit for your role in the accomplishments of your teammates, and build community with peer leaders. And I also want to say that, you know, if you're a new leader, you're doing a great job. So you are your hardest critic, and it's important for you to celebrate your accomplishments when things go well, and not be so hard on yourself. Also, you know, we're in a pandemic, like we're all doing the best we can. And similarly to how, you know, earlier I was talking about when you're in your first dev role and you're learning so much, like as a new leader, you're also in that new role where you're learning a ton of new skills. So be patient with yourself. And that's it. Thank you all for listening. And a special shout out to Jen Paxton at Privy, who encouraged me to submit this talk proposal. Billy Lazaro, who's my current manager and who's wonderful. A previous manager, Brian Watkins. I don't think he's here, but he's great. And Lara Hogan, who I don't actually know, but she blogs a lot about engineering leadership and management, and she's an author, and she's really influenced my leadership style. And here are my social links again, and I'm happy to go into any questions that anybody has.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your talk and teaching us how to grow together and how we can change that idea of success as we move through technical leadership. At this time, does anybody have any questions for Amanda? Feel free to post them in the chat, and we're happy to get those answered for you all. I am seeing one question from Carol. Question, could you provide an example of how you ask someone for feedback, like from a manager versus a peer? Especially if it's not a formal situation.
Yeah, totally. One example of something I did recently was I was leaving comments on a pull request, and when I was at Pivotal, we didn't do pull requests. We were pairing all the time. And so that was something that was pretty new to me. So I asked my teammates, like, right after I think we merged something in, like, oh, hey, I'm looking for some feedback on how I handled the comments in this pull request. And I asked some specific questions, like, do you prefer it if like in GitHub, there's a way to like leave all comments at once or leave them individually. Like, I asked a question about that. So in general, when I'm prompting for feedback, I always want it to be like quickly after the thing I want feedback on happens. and specific. So not just like, oh, how did that thing go? Another example might be facilitating a meeting. Like often a thing I'll do is I'll facilitate a meeting, and immediately after, even in the last like minute or two of the meeting, sometimes like ask for feedback on facilitation. Maybe after the meeting with a smaller group, like ask like, oh, how did this section go? It felt rough to me. So being really specific and shortly after the incident you want feedback on.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Does anybody else in our audience have any other questions for Amanda at this time? Feel free to post them in the chat. We have another question here. How does one get started in tech when there are hardly any junior developer positions around, specifically for someone who isn't formally educated, not in CS or a boot camp grad?
Yeah, so a big way that, jobs work in general is networking. So attending events like this, I know it's tricky now with COVID that we're not able to meet in person, but networking is huge because job postings and job listings, like there's a lot of arbitrary things about them with timing and there's just a lot of like opaqueness, I think, in job postings, but I think networking is huge and getting to know people. So that way, when they have positions open or like a friend of theirs has a position open, they can reach out to you. You never know like how people in your network are going to like show up for you. It's nuts. Like people you added on LinkedIn from this conference in a year might have a position open that you end up applying to or what have you. So yeah, attending events like this, connecting with people, getting to know them, I think is a really great boost to get your foot in the door.
Absolutely. And to all of our audience, you're here now. So you're already doing the next steps for getting those positions. Thank you so much for that question, Annie. Does anybody else have any other questions in the audience here for Amanda? And if there are no further questions, let's all give a huge thank you to Amanda for being here today and sharing her leadership style and her tips and advice. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you all. And if anyone wants to follow up, feel free to DM me or message me on LinkedIn or connect or